Once again, welcome and thank you for being here. Many years ago, I started a little game with myself. Probably, I really did about 10 years ago. First of all, I need to set this up by saying that when I first came to Reno back in 1958, I was a reader of the newspapers in those days, the morning, the Nevada State Journal, the afternoon paper, the Reno Gazette, and I pride myself on the fact that unless I've been on vacation, I think I've read the newspaper each and every day since then here in the city of Reno. And one of the things that I started doing about 10 years ago, I would see a great photo in the newspaper, and I would tell my wife, you know what, I'll bet this is a Marilyn Newton photo. And then I would look down at the credits, and sure enough, it was a Marilyn Newton photo, and I have done that ever since. Recently, a great Marilyn Newton photo of the Federal Building in downtown Reno, just something that stood out to me in the paper. Recently, a great Marilyn Newton photo of the moon over the Truckee River, and just some other outstanding photographs that I don't know if anybody else, not putting anybody down at the paper, but anybody could get those kind of photographs. And I'm very happy today, after this long-winded introduction, to get to our guest, and a very nice lady and a friend of mine for a lot of years, Marilyn Newton. Marilyn, nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Marilyn, you and I were chasing stories together in the 1960s.
That's right.
You with your old, as you said, press camera.
That's right.
And me with an old Bell & Howell or Bolex movie camera.
Exactly.
But you started, I read recently, when you were like 12 years old?
Yeah, I started with the Carson Appeal when I was 12.
Are you born in Carson? Are you local in the native Nevada?
Not a native Nevadan. I was born in Gulfport, Mississippi, but moved here when I was 5. Moved first to Reno and then ended up in Carson. And my mother was the circulation manager for the Appeal, and she needed paper boys. Nobody applied, so my twin sister and I got drafted.
Really?
Making us among the first paid paper girls in the country.
Well, how did you evolve into doing photographs for the paper at 12 years old?
Well, I'd always had an interest in writing and such, and so I wrote my first story at 12 for publication and shot my first photo at 13 for publication.
And the last story that you wrote was, as we tape this particular thing on a Monday, was today about Lovelock in the Gazette Journal, and you have become quite a proficient writer. I mean, I didn't realize you had that skill, but it seems like recently I've seen more of your bylines on the stories in addition to the pictures. How did that come about?
Well, it was something I did. I actually shot a bunch of photos and then wrote all the stories for the book I did, Alkali Angels, on Nevada's historic graveyards. Well, of course, we used snippets out of the stories, and they'd been sitting there just gathering dust, so to speak. Well, then I started shooting all these pictures of these ghost towns, and especially the old buildings, the ones that are falling down in ruins and such, because to me that's the history of these places. So I approached the bosses with, well, maybe we could use these. And they liked the idea, and they started doing it. So I do it once a month. And
you seem now, and you pretty much, a la John Tyson, you kind of just concentrate on the historical places, old graveyard markers and old bar scenes and that kind of thing in Nevada, right?
Well, yeah, in the old buildings, you know, like I did, well, even Austin, but Lovelock. It's all the buildings that are, most of the buildings except the courthouse, of course, that are ramshackle, falling down. But like I said, that to me, that's the start of Lovelock. That's the history of the place, or those buildings. And to me, photographing them is very important because we need to preserve that history.
How long have you been doing this, Marilyn? Professionally?
With the Gazette Journal, I've been there 48.5 years.
Now, did you work, I alluded to the fact that there were 2 newspapers for a lot of people that maybe knew, Morning Journal and the Afternoon Gazette. Did you work for both of those papers?
I did. I first started with the Gazette. I was hired as a Girl Friday, you know, just to answer phones and maybe do an obit or 2. And I was there 3 weeks and wrote my first front page story.
Really?
Yes.
And you had not had any formalized journalism training,
no,
right?
None. I went to 1 summer semester up at UNR and got the job at the Gazette, and I've been there ever since.
Well, you've had a remarkable career. Tell us about some of the highlights. I know that, didn't you have had run-ins with criminals?
Yes.
I think you tell a story, is it Jimmy Ng?
Yeah, Jimmy Ng, good old
and
Jimmy.
I had a run-in myself with Jimmy many years ago.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy was arrested for the murder of a father of a Reno cop. The father ran the Mecca bar in Sparks, and there was a burglary, robbery, whatever, and he was killed. The bartender was killed, and Jimmy was eventually arrested for that. And I was down in Sparks at where the Justice Court was at that point, which is now where the museum is. and waiting for him to come in for his arraignment, and Don Dondero was there with me. So anyway, he came as they were bringing him up the sidewalk. He broke away from the cops, kicked me in the legs, kicked me in the stomach, and kicked my camera, smashed it into my face, breaking my teeth off.
Oh my God.
You know, and of course I went down for the count, which was only a few seconds, but still I went down. And when I came to, Don Dondero was photographing me, and the cops were wailing on this guy, you know. But anyway, he told me, he says, "I'll put that camera on your grave." And I mean, that just about scared the bejeepers out of me.
Sure it did.
But anyway, he ended up getting released on a technicality, and I ran into him one night at the Mapes Hotel, and I happened to be with two Reno cops and their wives, and he asked me to come over and sit down and have a drink. So I did, and he bought me a drink, and he sat there for an hour and apologized. And he says, "Next time I'll pose for you," and 2 weeks later he was dead.
Yeah, interesting guy. I had a similar thing that I won't get into, but I had a similar thing with Jimmy. You've had numerous stories that stand out in your mind. Can you think of one thing that you've always said, that was the story, or that was the picture?
Well, my favorite photo was something I shot on, was either April 14th or 15th, 1977. And it was a chase with the Reno cops. And a guy named Jay Garrett had walked into a real estate office over on Ryland, pumped 4 slugs into his wife, walked around the counter, put another one into her head, and left laughing. Well, a gentleman that worked there was a former Reno cop, so of course he called. Well, I got the address wrong, and I thought it was on Ralston, and that's when the newspaper was up on 2nd Street. But I'm listening to my radio, and then I'm hearing Ryland, so I turned down 5th, and I just turned on to Sierra Street when it came over the police radio that the guy was westbound on 5th from Sierra. So I just pulled in a little alley and pulled right behind the cops. And I got a classic photo that was actually nominated for a Pulitzer at 7th and Sierra, and it's got him in his truck, and you can see the silhouette because it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then 3 motorcycle officers in the various positions of guns drawn getting off their bikes and such. Well, anyway, then he saw an opening, he took off. And then the speeds were in excess of 60 miles an hour. And I kept thinking, oh, I should back down, you know. But I thought, no, I've been here this long, I gotta get the shot. So anyway, it ended up in his house, and he turned around and fired at one of the officers, and then the other officers fired again, and shot his elbow off and shot him in the neck. He died in prison.
I've seen you at the top, I think, of major hotels and shooting pictures, or at least I've seen the pictures, I haven't seen you, hanging out of helicopters. Have you ever had any kind of a scary experience doing that? I don't mean people shooting at you, but any
Oh, no, because I've had people shooting at me too, you know.
That just kind of comes with the territory for Marilyn. People shooting at her.
Why not, you know. I did have one experience one time. I was going with a guy that was taking me up to photograph a downed aircraft. It was a postal plane that we were looking for. And it was only later that I found out he really was not a CAP pilot, but he volunteered, so I didn't know, so I went up with him.
Private pilot.
Oh, well, the first thing he does is we get airborne, he says, geez, I don't think we're going to have enough fuel to get there. And so I'm getting just a little bit nervous. So then he said, well, I'm going to switch tanks, so I'm going to shut off all the engines and such and switch tanks. And he did, and my stomach was up here, you know. But anyway, he got it turned on again. We flew around, we couldn't find the wreck. He ended up landing on a dirt road. This is in January, that was icy.
Oh boy.
You know, and we took off again. Well, I finally said, look, I've got what I need to go back. And we came back to the Reno airport, and he set that thing, I got out and kissed the ground. Believe me.
Marilyn, you have written many books, I think. Yeah.
3. Well, I've been involved in 3 books.
Okay.
The first was the Reno flood of '97.
All right.
Then I worked with Frank Mullen on the Donner Party Chronicles. I was the photographer, and of course he wrote it, which was great fun because I've always wanted to follow the Donner Trail, so I was able to do it. And then my Alkali Angels.
And are these still in print, and can people buy them?
Not the flood book, but the rest are still in print.
And like Sundance bookstores?
Oh, Sundance has them, yeah. Barnes and Noble.
You're really a treasure. Now you've won. You haven't gotten that Pulitzer yet, but you've won a lot of state awards, regional awards, Nevada, national awards too, and Nevada Press Association. Yeah.
400.
How many pictures have you shot in your professional? I mean, roughly.
Oh my words, millions now.
Millions, you really have.
Yeah, I really think so, and especially now with digital. I'm really shooting a lot.
Yeah, it's really changed. And you mentioned our old friend Don Dondero, who we all knew, and it was the premier photographer around here for a whole bunch of years. And Don told me one day, I was taking him up to fly and get some aerial shots. And he said, you know what's happening with photography today, Carroll? And I said, well, not really. What's happening? He said, it's this. And he had one of the digital cameras. He said, the housewife over on 5th Street there can get as good a picture as I don't think that's exactly true, but can get as good a picture as I can quality-wise with this camera. Yeah. And he said that's what's changing the face of photography.
Well, and it really is. I mean, nowadays, you take your phone out and anybody can shoot a photo. I'm not saying it's going to be, you know, award-winning, but anybody can get a photo. So more and more people are really shooting photos than ever used to before.
Marilyn, you've always had a great rapport with the press. I mean, they respect you, they know who you are, they know you're a professional. Has that, and I've been out of it for so long, has that changed? You know, we used to be able to do anything we wanted to, walk into Elmer Briscoe's office and say, hey, Chief, we need Bob. Okay, I even had the head of the Highway Patrol once tell me that he could put a light on the top of our news car. I said, can I get a red light? Bob Stenovich. He said, no, you can't have a red light, but I can give you an orange light. Yeah, exactly. What's the relationship today, the press and law enforcement?
Well, I'm still real close to law enforcement. You know, I mean, I was a reserve deputy in Carson for years and years and years, and I'm still deputized even in Humboldt County. So I'm still real close to them. And of course, my father was a cop, and my twin was a cop. So, you know, that all helped too. But I feel a closeness to them and to the fire department, so I work real close with them.
How's the newspaper business changed since you started way back when with the Gazette Journal?
Well, instead of using 2 1/4 and 4x5 cameras, we're now using digital, you know, and like I said, we're using cell phones. We do send back cell phone photos for the web. When we're out on stuff, we actually shoot a photo or two with our cell phones and send them back. I never, if you had asked me 30 years ago even, if we would ever be using our telephones to send photos, I would have laughed at you. And now it's the way it's the nature of the beast, you know.
How long are you going to be, I think I know the answer to this question because we discussed it recently, how long are you going to be employed as a Gazette Journal photographer?
Well, hopefully at least 1.5 years, because I want to get my 50 years in. But, you know, I'm still having fun.
Sure.
So why give it up as long as I'm having fun?
And you wouldn't stop even if you retired. Would you ever like to teach or just write feature stories or what?
Well, it's interesting. You see, I can't teach because I don't have a college education. They won't let me teach anywhere. But
and isn't that interesting for somebody that's been a professional in this business for 50 years, but she doesn't have that little sheepskin.
Little sheepskin that tells me I can teach. But I've already told the newspaper when I retire, all I want is my computer, my police radio, and my cameras, and then I can just chase the cops and firefighters all over town all day long.
So you do freelance things?
Yeah,
really,
mainly and just still have fun with it, yeah. But do what I want to do totally.
What are some of these great stories, and you're an excellent writer, and I will allude again to the fact of this is what, 26th today of February? 27th of February. If you'll check this morning's newspaper, you're going to see a great story on the city of Lovelock, pictures by Marilyn. You want to pursue that? Tell me some of the other ideas for stories. You want to go to Ely and do something on White Pine County or what?
Well, I'm going to end up doing the whole state. I've already got all the stories written, like I said, because they were written for the book. I've got photos on a great deal of them. I've got enough photos to keep me going for at least 2 years. To do stories every month for 2 years. And I'm not done shooting. Every time I get out someplace, I'm shooting.
This is a tough question because probably they're still alive. Nicest politician that you've ever been involved with?
Bill Raggio.
Bill Raggio, yeah, absolutely. I think that's true.
Well, I say that, but there's been, you know, I'm really fond of Brian Sandoval. He's very nice, very friendly, easy to work with. And there's been a few others too.
How'd you get along with the Laxalts, the Michael Callahan's? Good, no problem.
Yeah.
Did you ever get involved with Grant Sawyer?
Yeah, I knew Grant Sawyer.
You were just starting probably then.
Yeah, I was starting out, but you know, you realize I grew up in Carson City. So I grew up with the Russell family. And I used to play at the governor's mansion.
Charles Russell.
Yeah, because he had twin sons, and my sister and I being twins, we always played at the governor's mansion. So I've known all the governors since then, and I've liked all of them.
They've all been pretty good people, haven't they?
Yeah, they really.
Well, Marilyn Newton, you are I know this has been told to you before, but I really mean this. You're a treasure to the state of Nevada, particularly northern Nevada. And Marilyn, you ought to run for office. I'll bet you could get elected. Just don't hire me as your campaign manager.
Yeah, that might be a disaster.
That's a kiss of death. I think you took a picture of me when I lost an election once, and I was looking very, very sad. It was on the front page.
Well, you should be sad. You shouldn't have lost.
The next day, I was sad. Marilyn, thank you for being our guest. We do appreciate it. Keep reading and the great stories by Marilyn and looking at those phenomenal pictures.
Oh,
thank you, and our thanks to you. We'll see you next time.